There is a short scene late in Adventure Time where Marceline, who has been alive for over 1,000 years, sits next to Princess Bubblegum, who has been alive for almost as long, and the two of them just look at each other the way people look at each other when they have already said everything that matters and the only thing left is to be in the same room. It is not the kind of moment a children's show is supposed to be able to earn. It is certainly not the kind of moment you would have predicted from the first episode, where the conflict of the day involves a man kidnapping princesses and a boy and his magic dog leaping into a cave to punch the problem in the face. And yet, by the time the show reaches that quiet moment, it feels earned, and it feels inevitable, and almost nobody talks about how that happened. Tonight on Pine Hat, we are going through every season of Adventure Time, slowly, in order, and we are going to talk about the strange and beautiful way it kept getting better every single year. So get comfortable, turn the lights low, settle in. We will be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. We have to start before season 1, because the strangest thing about Adventure Time is that it almost did not exist at all. The pilot was not made for Cartoon Network. It was a short animated film that drifted around the internet for a year or two before anyone really agreed on what to do with it. It was created by a young animator named Pendleton Ward, who at the time had been working on other people's shows and who had a very specific kind of humor. The pilot is a strange little artifact if you go back and watch it. The voices are different. The color palette is brighter and flatter. The energy is faster and looser and weirder. Princess Bubblegum is voiced by someone other than the actress who eventually defined the role. Finn, who is not yet called Finn, is a small, odd creature who feels like he wandered in from a different cartoon entirely. The whole thing is about a boy and his dog going to rescue a princess from the Ice King, which is the exact same plot as the first proper episode of the show, but it is told in a way that gives you almost no information at all about the world. There is no Mushroom War. There is no Candy Kingdom philosophy. There is no Marceline. There is just a boy and a dog and a snowy mountain, and a sense that the universe these characters live in is a little broken in a way nobody is explaining. That pilot was made years before the actual series began, and it caught fire online in the way that very small, strange things sometimes do. People sent it to each other. Animators on other shows shared it. Eventually, Cartoon Network noticed, and after a long process of pitching and rejection and repitching, Adventure Time was officially picked up as a series. The version that finally went into production was a deeper, slower, more considered show than the pilot suggested it would be. Pendleton Ward built a writer's room and a storyboarding culture that was unusual for a children's network at the time, and he gave his storyboard artists a lot of freedom to bring their own sensibilities to each individual episode. The whole show was originally conceived as a sort of small, simple comedy. Almost nobody involved seems to have known in those early days what they were actually making. When the first season finally premiered in April of 2010, what aired was much more recognizable than the pilot, but still very, very different from what Adventure Time would eventually become. The first season is 26 episodes long, and most of them are 11 minutes, which means that an entire half-hour block is 2 unrelated little stories. The pacing is fast and the jokes are constant. Almost every episode is a self-contained adventure, a kind of fairy tale in miniature. Finn and Jake find a mysterious dungeon. Finn and Jake fight an evil wizard. Finn and Jake encounter a princess made of an unlikely substance. The world is being built around them, but you do not feel the building, because the show has not yet decided that you should care about the structure underneath. What season 1 does have, even from the very first episode, is the underlying weirdness. Finn, in the first proper episode of the show, is not a boy living a normal life with a few magic friends. He is a boy who lives in a tree fort in the middle of a forest, with a yellow talking dog, who can stretch into any shape and who is also, somehow, his brother. He lives in a country called the Land of Oo, which is dotted with princesses made of candy, princesses made of bubblegum, princesses made of cinnamon, princesses made of lumpy space. There are mountains that look like skulls, oceans that are just briefly mentioned, kingdoms that exist for one joke and then never come back. And every so often, in the corner of a frame, in the design of a building, in the rust on a sword, in the strange shape of a rock, the show shows you something that does not quite belong in a fantasy world. A piece of an old highway, a snippet of a road sign, a rusted out vehicle, half buried in the soil. The show never points to these things. It never says, look, the world used to be different. It just puts them there, in the background, as if it is daring you to notice. This is the first thing that Adventure Time does that almost no other children's show was doing at the time. It plants seeds. It builds a world that has a past it has not explained yet, and it trusts the audience to feel that past without ever being told about it directly. If you are watching season 1 as a child, you do not notice. You are watching a boy hit a thing with a sword. If you are watching season 1 as an adult, you start to feel a little uneasy because you can see that the bright colors and the silly voices are sitting on top of something that used to be very different and probably very sad. The other thing season 1 does, which becomes the foundation for everything later, is establish a tone of total commitment. The show is silly, but it never winks. When Finn jumps into a fight, he means it. When Jake stretches into the shape of a cube to comfort a friend, he is sincere. When the Ice King kidnaps a princess and demands she marry him, the joke is dark, but the show plays it as a real situation that the characters have to deal with. There is no narrator stepping in to acknowledge that any of this is strange. There is no wink at the camera. The world is the world, and the rules of the world are the rules, and you either accept them or you do not. That commitment, which is harder to write than it looks, is the bedrock of everything Adventure Time eventually builds. Still, if you stopped watching after season 1, you would not call Adventure Time a great show. You would call it a charming show, a creative show, a strange and funny little show, but you would not say it had moved you. You would not say it had broken your heart. You would not say it had said anything serious about death, or memory, or identity, or the slow loss of the person you used to be. All of that is coming. None of it is here yet. Season 1 is the foundation. The house has not yet been built on top. What season 1 does promise, by the way, is that the show is going to keep widening its world. By the end of those first 26 episodes, you have met the major players: Finn, Jake, Princess Bubblegum, the Ice King, Lady Rainicorn, Lumpy Space Princess, Marceline, and a small, helpful, slightly anxious, sentient video game console called BMO. You have seen them all in their default modes. None of them have yet been given a second dimension. Princess Bubblegum is the responsible one. The Ice King is the antagonist. Marceline is the dangerous one. BMO is the cute one. The show is, in season 1, almost a comic strip. The characters have one note each, and the music of the show comes from how the notes bounce off each other. Marceline, though, is interesting even at the start. She appears for the first time in season 1 in an episode where Finn and Jake are forced to move out of their house because she has decided to claim it for herself. She is introduced as a villain. She is moody, she is rude, she is powerful, she eats the color red out of objects with her teeth. By the end of the episode, she has shown that she is not really a villain at all. She is just a person, a 1,000-year-old vampire person who is bored and lonely and looking for something to do. The show in season 1 does not really know yet how important she is going to become. Her first appearance is structured like a problem of the week, but you can see, even in that early episode, that the writers know they have something more dangerous than another princess on their hands. She is the first character whose history feels older than the show. If you sit with season 1 and try to find the moments that point forward, the moments that hint at what Adventure Time is going to become, you keep returning to small things. A reference to the Lich, a creature you have not properly met yet, a glimpse of a building from another era, a song that the Ice King sings to himself, just once. That sounds less like a villain's monologue and more like a man trying to remember something he has forgotten. There is a moment, very early, where Finn looks at the Ice King and feels, for just a second, sorry for him, before remembering that this is the man who keeps kidnapping his friends and going back into anger. That second of pity is, in hindsight, a structural beam in the entire show. Adventure Time, eventually, is going to be the show about that second. About the moment of recognizing that the villain is not a villain, that he is a sick old man with a story, and about deciding what to do with that recognition. But all of that is later. Season 1 ends with Finn and Jake more or less where they began. Bigger heroes, slightly older, with a slightly larger circle of friends. The world is still bright, The princesses are still being kidnapped. The Ice King is still mostly a punchline. The threads have been laid down, but the show has not yet decided to pull on them. What it does promise, very strongly, is that there's a curiosity built into the visual design of Adventure Time from the very first episode. The world is too detailed, too specific, too carefully ruined for the show to be only about jokes. The remnants of pre-apocalyptic civilization are everywhere if you look. A washing machine in a clearing, a car door embedded in a wall, a crashed jet that has become someone's living room. These things are there because someone, somewhere in the production, decided that the world deserved a backstory even if the audience never asked for one. That instinct, that commitment to the unseen iceberg under the show, is what makes everything that comes later possible. So season 1 is the show learning to walk. It is funny and confident and strange, and it is hiding more than it is telling. It is not, by the standards that Adventure Time will eventually set for itself, a great season. It is a great pilot for a great show. And to understand why the show gets better every year, you have to understand that it does not get better by getting more serious. It gets better by remaining exactly the show it was in season 1, and slowly, carefully, allowing the depth that was always there to surface. By season 2, you can already feel the surface start to break. Season 2 of Adventure Time premiered in October of 2010, only a few months after the first season finished. From a production point of view, this is important. It means the writers had not yet had a long break in which to reconsider everything. The creative team that made the first season was largely the same creative team that made the second, and they were still in the rhythm they had built. What you see in season 2 is not a reinvention. It is the same group of people taking their second pass at the same toolkit and pushing it a little further every time. The first major thing season 2 does is meet Marceline again, and not the way it met her the first time. Her debut episode in season 1 had set her up as a kind of bratty antagonist, someone you could see was more interesting than her introduction, but who, as a character, did not yet have a center. In season 2, she comes back, and the show starts to use her differently. There is an episode where Finn tries, in his own awkward way, to befriend her and to make her feel something other than amused or annoyed. There is a moment where she sings properly, in her own voice. And it is the first time the show has used music to do something that is not a comedy bit. Adventure Time in season 1 had been a show with songs. In season 2, very quietly, it becomes a show with a soundtrack. The difference is not about quality, it is about purpose. A song is now allowed to mean something instead of just punctuating a joke. This is also the season where the show starts to introduce the Lich properly. Not as a name dropped in passing, but as a presence on screen. The Lich appears as a creature out of a very different kind of story than the one Adventure Time has been telling. He moves slowly. He speaks with multiple voices layered on top of each other. He is sealed away in amber inside a chamber. And Finn and Jake have to be told the rules of how to deal with him because the rules are so old that nobody really remembers them. He is, structurally, the first villain in the show whose existence implies that the world Finn and Jake live in is the second world, not the first. Something happened before the bright, candy-coated kingdoms we have been watching. Something that was so bad that someone had to seal a thing like the Lich inside amber and then bury that amber under a mountain and then build a kingdom on top of the mountain to keep him from getting out. The Lich does not need to do much to imply all of that. He just has to exist. Once you have seen him, you cannot unsee the implication that Ooh is what came after. The other thing season 2 does, which the show could not have done in season 1, is begin to use the Ice King as something other than a problem. In the first season, the Ice King is the joke. He kidnaps princesses, he gets defeated, he goes home to his ice castle and writes terrible romantic poetry to no one. In season 2, the show begins to crack the joke open. There is an episode where you see the Ice King at home alone, not plotting anything, not being a villain, just lonely. There is an episode where he tries and fails to be friends with someone in a real way. There is, late in the season, a small 2-part Christmas story called Holly Jolly Secrets, which begins to do something the show had not done before. It takes you inside the Ice King's personal history just a little. It implies that the man inside the Ice King is not who he seems. It does not yet show you everything. It just opens a door and lets you see, for a few seconds, that there is a room inside the character you had been treating as a punchline. Once you have looked into that room, you cannot look at him the same way again. Holly Jolly Secrets is the kind of episode that, in another show, would be the standout. In Adventure Time, it is one of many. The whole tone of season 2 is the show learning that it is allowed to use the structure of an 11-minute story to set up an emotion the audience does not realize it is being set up to feel. There is a strange quietness that creeps into the back half of the season. The colors do not change. The voices do not change. But the show starts choosing to end on small, almost wistful beats, where a character looks at something for a second longer than they need to, and the music holds just past the joke, and the credits come up while you are still processing what just happened. If you watch the first season and then the second season back to back, you can feel a temperature change. Season 1 is a sugar rush. Season 2 is a sugar rush that occasionally pauses to look out the window. Part of the reason this works, by the way, is the people who are doing the storyboarding. Adventure Time is famous for the way it handed enormous responsibility to its storyboard artists. 2 artists were assigned to each episode and were largely responsible not just for staging the scene, but for the dialogue, the rhythm, the small character moments, the choice of which beat to linger on. The writer's room provided a premise, an outline, the broad shape of what the episode needed to do, and then the storyboard artist took it from there. This is unusual for animation, even now. It means that the show, instead of having one single authorial voice, had a kind of rotating chorus of voices, each of them passing the same characters through their own sensibility. Some of those storyboard artists were already very serious, very thoughtful, very interested in melancholy. By season 2, the network had begun to let them follow their instincts. The result was that an episode about the Ice King could be a slapstick chase one week and a quiet study of loneliness the next, and the show did not feel inconsistent. It felt like it was made by people who all loved the same world from different angles. This is also the season where the geography of the world starts to fill in. You see more of the Candy Kingdom, you see more of the Ice Kingdom, you see more of the Nightosphere, the place where Marceline's father lives and rules. You meet that father properly, and you start to understand that Marceline's relationship with him is not simple. The show does not yet tell you the whole story of why she is angry at him, but it shows you in the way she fights with him and the way she refuses to be in the same room with him for too long that there is a story to be told. Marceline, in season 2, becomes the first character in the show whose past is visibly heavier than her present. She walks into rooms carrying something. The show is careful not to tell you what, it just lets you see the weight. The Lich, by the end of season 2, becomes the show's first proper season-ending threat. The finale, called Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil, brings him out of his amber and into the world, and Finn and Jake and Princess Bubblegum have to deal with him in a way that costs them something. There is a moment where Princess Bubblegum is damaged in a way the show has never let a major character be damaged before, and there is a moment where Finn has to make a decision he is not ready to make. The episode does not resolve cleanly. It resolves the way real season finales of more serious shows resolve, with a problem solved at a cost, and a few more problems opened up. Adventure Time in season 1 had season-ending stories that were essentially big adventures. Adventure Time in season 2 has a season-ending story that is also a turning point. You can feel the show deciding that it wants to be the kind of show that has turning points. If you imagine the whole arc of Adventure Time as a curve, season 2 is the bend at the bottom. The show is still mostly a comedy, most of the episodes are still self-contained, the world is still presented in the same bright, friendly, slightly absurd visual key. But something has shifted in the way the writers and the storyboard artists are using the world, and once that shift happens, you can feel it through every episode that comes after. The show has learned that it is allowed to be quiet. It has learned that it is allowed to put a sad moment at the end of a silly story. It has learned that the audience will follow it. It has also learned, and this is the most important thing, that it can leave things unsaid. There is, by the end of season 2, an enormous amount of information about the world that the show has not given you. You do not yet know what the Mushroom War was. You do not yet know who Marceline really is. You do not yet know who the Ice King used to be. You do not yet know why the world looks like a fantasy land, but is built on top of a ruin. The show has trusted you to feel all of these gaps without explaining them. And the more it trusts you, the more you trust it, and the more it can put a small, true, sad detail in the middle of a chase scene and know that you will catch it. One more thing season 2 does before we move on, it introduces very lightly the idea that the relationship between Princess Bubblegum and Marceline is more than friendship. The show in 2010 and 2011 could not say this out loud. Cartoon Network in that era was not the place where a children's show could openly portray a romantic relationship between two women, but the storyboard artists and the show's leadership were already setting it up. There are small moments in season 2 that, if you watch them as a child, are just two characters with history. If you watch them later, they read as much more. Adventure Time in season 2 begins what will become one of the longest, most patient, most quietly devastating love stories in the history of American children's animation, and it begins it by not saying anything about it at all. It just lets the two characters be in the same room and lets the way they look at each other do the work. By the time season 2 ends, you can tell the show is not going to be what season 1 promised. It is going to be something else, something stranger and sadder and more deliberate. And you can also tell that the people making it have decided to take their time. They are not in a rush. They are going to build the iceberg slowly. They are going to show you the tip and let you feel the rest. Season 3 is a season where it stops being possible to pretend Adventure Time is only a comedy. That sounds dramatic, and it is meant to. Adventure Time is still a comedy in season 3. It is still very, very funny. There are still episodes whose entire premise is a strange physical joke or a pun stretched out to its breaking point. But season 3 is also the season that contains an episode called What Was Missing, and once that episode airs, the show is in different territory, whether it wants to be or not. We should sit with What Was Missing for a while, because it is the episode where the show first tells you, unambiguously, that the people inside it have inner lives that are not going to be fully addressed by the plot. The setup is simple. A small magical creature called the Door Lord steals personal items from Finn, Jake, Princess Bubblegum, Marceline, and Bimo, and the only way to get the items back is to open a door that requires the group to sing a song that comes from a real place inside them. The episode is structured as a musical, which is in itself a small revolution for Adventure Time at the time. The songs are written, in large part, by the storyboard artist Rebecca Sugar, who is at this point still a few years away from creating her own show, and who is one of the people most responsible for the slow musical maturity of Adventure Time as a whole. The song Marceline sings to Princess Bubblegum in this episode is not a song in the way most cartoon songs are songs. It is the character expressing a hurt she has been carrying for an unclear amount of time, in the only register the show has given her to express herself in. It is short, it is sharp, it is not played for laughs, and it lands like a small grenade in the middle of an 11-minute kids show. The show in season 3 can do this because of the foundation that was built in seasons 1 and 2. If you tried to put What Was Missing inside season 1, it would feel wrong. The audience would not yet trust the characters enough to be moved by them. The voices would still feel like joke deliveries. The world would still feel too thin to support the weight. But by season 3, the audience has had 2 seasons of being slowly, gently led toward exactly this kind of moment. The characters have been given the space to be people, the world has been allowed to feel old, the relationships have been allowed to be complicated. So when Marceline sings and the camera holds on Princess Bubblegum's face and Princess Bubblegum does not say anything in response and instead just looks down, the moment works. The audience has been trained to read silence. The audience has been trained to know that the absence of an answer is itself an answer. What Was Missing is not the only episode in season 3 that does this kind of work. There are small, strange episodes that drift inside characters' interior lives and find things they would never admit to out loud. There's an episode where Jake's daughter kind of briefly becomes a major character, and the show treats her storyline with more weight than it strictly needs to. There is an episode where the show takes a side character and gives them a backstory, just for the sake of giving them a backstory, even though it does not affect the plot. The whole season, in retrospect, feels like the writers stretching their muscles. They have realized that they are allowed to do more, and they are testing what more they can do. The other major thing season 3 does is introduce properly the idea that the Ice King used to be someone else. There is an episode in the latter part of the season called Memory of a Memory, where Finn and Jake go inside Marceline's mind to recover a memory she has lost, and inside that memory, very briefly, very quietly, the door cracks open on who the Ice King used to be. You do not yet know everything. You do not yet know his name. You do not yet know how he became the Ice King. But the show begins here to insist that there is a man underneath the crown, and that the audience is going to have to hold that idea in their hands until the show is ready to say more. This is, I think, the thing that makes Adventure Time fundamentally different from most other children's shows of its era. Most children's shows would have made the Ice King's backstory into a full arc, with a clear emotional payoff and a triumphant resolution. Adventure Time, in Season 3, just slips the information into your hand, sideways, in a single shot in the middle of an unrelated story. It says, "Here, take this, carry it. We will come back to it eventually. We are not in a rush." The pacing of revelation in Adventure Time is one of the things that makes it so unusual. The show is built on the assumption that the audience is going to stay for the long haul, and that if it withholds something for a season or two, the payoff will be much larger when it finally comes. This is a confident kind of storytelling. It assumes a certain kind of viewer, a viewer who is paying attention, a viewer who is going to remember the small things. In 2011, on a children's network, this was not the kind of viewer the industry generally believed existed. Adventure Time was one of a small handful of shows that decided to believe in that viewer anyway. The fact that it turned out to be right, that the audience really was paying attention, is one of the reasons the show kept being allowed to get more ambitious every year. Season 3 also begins to develop the idea that the Land of Ooo has a global structure, not just a series of unrelated kingdoms. You see the Lich again, in a different form. You see hints of what is on the other side of the world. You see the Cosmic Owl, a strange recurring figure who appears in characters' dreams and who seems to operate by rules nobody quite understands. The cosmology is being layered. Underneath the kingdom level, there is a planetary level. Underneath the planetary level, there is something even stranger waiting to be revealed. The show is building this cosmology without making a big deal of it. Each new layer arrives quietly, as part of an episode that on its surface is about something else, and the audience accumulates the structure piece by piece. By the end of Season 3, the show has set itself a problem. It has implied that there is an enormous amount of history beneath the surface of its world, that there is an enormous amount of pain beneath the surface of its characters, that there are mysteries to be answered and traumas to be addressed and love stories to be told. It has implied all of this without yet committing to any of it. The writers know that they have to start cashing in some of these promises. They cannot keep dangling them forever. Season 4 is when the cashing in starts. And it starts with an episode that is widely considered, even now, one of the best episodes of any animated show ever made. Season 4 of Adventure Time premiered in April of 2012. By then, the show had been on the air for 2 full years, and it had become a genuine cultural phenomenon. The merchandise was everywhere. The fan art was constant. The references in other shows had begun. There were academic essays about Adventure Time in academic journals, written by people who used the phrases narrative complexity and post-apocalyptic mythopoesis without irony. The show, which had begun as a strange little pilot a few people noticed on the internet, was now a cornerstone of the network. With that came 2 things. The first was creative freedom, more than most children's shows ever get. The second was pressure, the pressure of being a beloved show that has to keep being beloved. What Adventure Time chose to do with both of those things in Season 4 was sit you down in a room with the Ice King and tell you who he used to be. The episode is called I Remember You. It is one of the late episodes of the season. It is 11 minutes long. It is, on the surface, a story about the Ice King going to Marceline's house to ask her to help him write a song. That is, structurally, all that happens. The Ice King knocks. Marceline lets him in. He explains that he wants to write a song with her. She is irritated. He is oblivious. He pulls out a stack of old papers full of his terrible attempts at lyrics. They start to read them together. And as they read, the audience begins to realize that the papers, the lyrics, the songs, the Ice King has been writing for centuries are not just nonsense. They are messages. They are letters. They are addressed to her. The episode does not tell you the full story of the Ice King's history yet. It does not yet spell out, in plain terms, that the man inside the crown was a scholar named Simon Petrikov, that he found a crown in a strange old shop, that he put it on, that it slowly drove him mad and turned him into the creature you have been watching. The episode just sits you down in front of two characters and asks you to listen to them. Marceline, who has been irritated at the Ice King for most of the show, slowly realizes in the middle of the song that she knows the man she is looking at. She has known him for centuries. He used to take care of her. He used to be her friend, and he does not remember her. He does not remember himself. He is just in this room trying to write a song that he does not understand the meaning of. And she is in this room trying to hold a conversation with a man who is no longer there. The song they sing at the end of the episode is called Remember You. It was written, by most accounts, by Rebecca Sugar. The lyrics are taken more or less directly from the songs the Ice King has been writing for centuries. His desperate attempts to remember Marceline, his desperate attempts to apologize for who he is becoming. Marceline, sitting next to him, sings him a verse in return. She tells him that this is not her fault and that she does not know what she is going to do, but that she does remember him. The song is not resolved, it is interrupted. The Ice King forgets the moment as soon as it is over. He says goodbye, he leaves, the episode ends. There is no other episode like it in the history of American children's television up to that point, and I am not sure there is one after it either. It is an episode about dementia. It is an episode about loss. It is an episode about loving a person who is no longer the person you used to love and who does not remember loving you. It works as a self-contained 11-minute story. It does not require you to have memorized the lore. The show has been building the foundation under it for 3 full seasons, and when you sit down in front of it, the foundation just holds. The episode is one of the most quietly devastating things in the medium. This is the moment, I think, when Adventure Time stopped being a show that some people thought was secretly great and became a show that almost everyone agreed was great. I Remember You was the episode that people sent to friends with a message that said you have to watch this. It was the episode that people who had given up on the show came back for. It was the episode that critics started writing about as proof that animation could do things that live action could not. The show, in season 4, had walked all the way through a door that had been creaking open since the first time the Ice King looked sad. It is worth saying that I Remember You is not the only thing season 4 does. The whole season is denser than the seasons that came before it. There is a finale that escalates the Lich storyline in a way the show had been building towards since season 2. There is a long stretch of episodes that begin to develop Finn's interior life in ways the earlier seasons had only sketched. Finn is in this season a slightly older version of himself, still a boy, but more aware that he is going to grow up, more aware that things hurt, more aware that not every fight ends with the bad guy getting punched and the day getting saved. There is an episode where he meets a version of himself in an alternate reality that is in some ways more like the kind of hero he wants to be, and the comparison is not entirely flattering. There is an episode where he tries, in his own awkward way, to talk to Princess Bubblegum about how he feels, and the show is honest about how badly it goes. Finn's crush on Princess Bubblegum, which had been mostly a running joke in the earlier seasons, becomes in season 4 something the show takes seriously, not because the show endorses it, but because Finn does. And the show is interested in what it means for him to be a child carrying around feelings he does not yet have the equipment to process. There is also, in this season, a quiet but significant development of the world's backstory. You learn more about the Mushroom War, not through exposition, but through small visual moments. You see flashbacks to the early days after the apocalypse. You see a glimpse in I Remember You itself of Simon Petrikov, the man who would become the Ice King in those days. Taking care of a small vampire child you eventually understand to be Marceline. The show, as far as fans have pieced it together from this and later episodes, is slowly building a 1,000-year history out of fragments. It does not lay any of it out as a coherent narrative. It gives you pieces. It trusts you to assemble them. By the end of season 4, the show is no longer pretending to be the show it was at the beginning. Episodes are still 11 minutes long. Most of them still resolve on their own. But the air around them has changed. The audience has been let in on the fact that the world has a buried history that is more important than any individual episode's plot. The audience has been let in on the fact that the characters are carrying memories the show is going to slowly excavate. The audience has been let in on the fact that the Ice King is a tragedy. Once these facts are in the open, every episode that comes after is being read against them. A silly episode is no longer just silly. It is silly while a tragedy waits underneath. That texture, that double layer of comedy and underlying weight is the texture the show will run on for the rest of its life. The other thing that happens between season 4 and season 5 is that the show begins to expand its format. Up to this point, Adventure Time had been almost entirely a show of self-contained 11-minute episodes. There were the occasional pairs of episodes that formed a longer story, and there were season finales that escalated. But the show had not really tried to do anything that required you to commit to a continuous arc across many weeks. Starting in the back half of season 4 and into season 5, this changes. The show begins to experiment with longer stories. It begins to chain episodes together more deliberately. It begins to plan multi-episode arcs that are designed to be watched as a unit. It is not yet doing the full miniseries it will eventually do, but you can see the show getting ready. Season 5 is the season where Adventure Time really commits. If you ask people who watch Adventure Time which season is their favorite, you will get different answers depending on who you ask. Some people will say season 4 because of I Remember You. Some people will say season 6 because of the existential turn. Some people will say season 7 because of stakes and islands. But a lot of people, and I include myself when I am being honest, will say season 5. Season 5 is a season where Adventure Time stops being a show that occasionally surprises you with depth and becomes a show that is depth all the way through, from beginning to end. By most counts, season 5 is also the longest season the show ever made, running for 52 episodes, which means it is, on its own, almost as much Adventure Time as the entire first 2 seasons combined. The season opens with a multi-part story that takes Finn and Jake to a place called Prismo's Time Room, where they meet a pink wish-granting figure who knows more about the universe than any character they have met so far. This story, called Finn the Human and Jake the Dog, sets up the multiverse premise that the show will return to over and over again. There is an episode where Finn is told that, in another universe, he is a baby, and that if he chooses correctly, he can be reunited with his lost biological father. This is the first time the show has clearly implied that Finn has a father at all. The idea is planted here and will not pay off for some time, but the planting is done in a way that you can feel, even if you do not yet know what it means. Soon after, the season goes somewhere even stranger. There is a multi-part story called Simon and Marcy that, more than any other episode in the show, fixes the relationship between Simon Petrikov and Marceline into the bedrock of the series. The episode shows you, in flashback, the years after the Mushroom War. The world is in ruins. The sky is gray. Buildings are collapsed and the streets are full of dust and strange mutated creatures. A small vampire girl, who is Marceline, is being protected by a man named Simon, who used to be a scholar and is slowly losing himself to the magical crown he wears for warmth. The episode is structured around a single quest. Simon and Marcy are trying to find a particular kind of soup that will make Marcy feel better. That is the plot. The episode is not about the plot. It is about the way Simon sings to her to keep her calm. It is about the way she looks up at him as her protector. It is about the moment, late in the episode, when Simon almost loses control and almost hurts her, and then forces himself back, and then sings to her again. The song he sings is a real song, an actual song from outside the show, used here as an artifact from the old world, and the way the show uses it changes the song forever for anyone who has seen the episode. Simon and Marcy is the kind of episode that, once you have watched it, retroactively rewrites every Ice King episode you have ever seen. You cannot watch him sing his terrible little love songs in his castle anymore without thinking about the man he used to be, kneeling in the dirt next to a small frightened child, singing her to sleep. The Ice King, who in season 1 was a joke about a kidnapper, has become, by the middle of season 5, one of the most tragic characters in modern animation. And the show has done this without ever stopping being funny. The Ice King is still allowed to be a punchline. He still has episodes that are entirely about his own bumbling absurdity, but the punchlines work differently now, because the audience knows what the punchlines are sitting on top of. Season 5 is also the season where the show begins, in earnest, the long story of Finn and his father. Finn finds out, here, that he has a father at all, and he begins the long, complicated, painful process of wanting to meet him. The episodes that deal with this are not satisfying in the way the audience might have wanted. The show does not give Finn a triumphant reunion with the man who left him. It gives him, instead, glimpses of a father named Martin, and a slow and painful realization that the father he had been imagining is not the father he actually has. Martin, when we see him properly, is not a hero. He is a survivor. He is selfish and charming and dishonest, and he is the kind of parent who can ruin a child without trying. The full physical confrontation, the actual face-to-face moment, is held off until the start of season 6, but the emotional ground is being laid here, in season 5, in a way that prepares you for what is coming. What is interesting about season 5, structurally, is how confident it is. Earlier seasons had built their dark moments around their lighter ones, carefully, with a lot of cushioning. By season 5, the show no longer feels the need to cushion as much. It still has plenty of silly, funny, weightless episodes, but it can put a heavy episode next to another heavy episode, and the show does not lose its rhythm. It has earned the right to ask its audience to sustain its attention. The audience has come along with it and is willing to sit with whatever it wants to do. Pendleton Ward, the show's creator, stepped back from his day-to-day show-running duties at around this point in the production. This is the kind of thing that, in a different show, might have led to a sharp decline in quality. Showrunners are usually the linchpin. When they leave, the show often falls apart. Adventure Time did not fall apart. Pendleton Ward did not entirely leave, but he stopped being the day-to-day boss, and the responsibility shifted to Adam Muto, who had been working on the show for years and who understood it deeply. Muto's stewardship is one of the underappreciated facts about the back half of Adventure Time. The show, in his hands, did not become a different show. It became a more deliberate version of the show it already was. The transition is, in retrospect, almost invisible. If you had not been told that the showrunner had changed, you might not have noticed. The handoff was that smooth. The other major thing season 5 does is begin the long, slow, careful project of telling the truth about Marceline and Princess Bubblegum. The two of them are in more episodes together. They are forced to work together. They argue. They have unfinished business. The show, in the back half of season 5, contains an episode where the two of them go on a long journey and have to confront the fact that they used to be close and that they are no longer close, and that neither of them is willing to say out loud why. The episode is built around the absence of a confession. The audience can feel what is not being said. The audience can feel very clearly what the relationship was. The show has not yet said anything explicit. It does not need to. It has trained the audience over 5 seasons to read the empty space between two characters as itself a kind of statement. If you watch season 5 all the way through, what you come away with is a sense that the show has become, structurally, a long novel disguised as a series of short stories. The short stories still work as short stories. You can still pick a random episode and enjoy it on its own. But the show is now, very clearly, building towards something. And the something is not a single climax, but an accumulation of resonance. Every episode adds another small detail to the picture. Every minor character ends up turning out to matter. The world keeps widening. The history keeps deepening. The relationships keep complicating. Season 5 ends, like season 2 before it, on a turning point. There is a finale that brings the Lich back into the center of the story, that involves the multiverse and Prismo and a wish gone wrong. It is the kind of finale that closes one chapter and opens another. You watch the credits roll on season 5 and you understand that the show that is about to begin in season 6 is going to be a different show. Not in tone, not in cast, but in scope. The world has been opened too wide to be contained inside the old format. Something has to give. In season 6, something does. Season 6 is, depending on how you count, the strangest season of Adventure Time. It begins with one of the most ambitious multi-episode openings in the history of the show, and it ends with a story that essentially restructures the way you think about reality inside the world of Ooh. In between, there are episodes that look like the silliest, smallest things the show has ever made, sitting right next to episodes that are large, mythological, and deeply strange. The whiplash is part of the design. The writers, by this point, are confident enough in the audience to put a deeply philosophical episode next to a quick joke episode and assume nobody will complain. The season opens with the resolution of the cliffhanger from the end of season 5. The Lich, having gained access to Prismo's time room, has made a wish that essentially undid the world. Finn and Jake have to deal with the consequences. The opening 2-part story, called Wake Up and Escape from the Citadel, takes them to a cosmic prison full of escaped cosmic criminals and culminates in a moment where Finn finally meets, in person, his father Martin. The reunion does not go the way Finn wants it to. Martin is, as we said earlier, not a good man, and the meeting goes badly, and Finn loses his arm in the process. The arm grows back later, briefly, as a tiny flower, in one of the most visually striking moments the show ever produces. The grass blade sword that Finn has carried for a long time becomes part of his body in a literal way. The flower is a small, visible reminder that Finn has been changed by his father and that the change is not over. That opening is essentially a 22-minute emotional event broken into 2 11-minute segments. It is the closest the show has come so far to a movie. The pacing, the imagery, the stakes, all of them are dialed up to a level the show had not previously attempted. And then, having done this, the show immediately drops back into a series of very small standalone episodes. The juxtaposition is jarring on purpose. The show is saying, look, the big moments matter, but the small moments matter too. And we are not going to pretend that life inside Ooh only happens during the big moments. The standalone episodes in season 6 are, if you watch closely, where some of the most experimental work in the show happens. There are episodes that are essentially small character studies. There are episodes that play with form. There is an episode where Finn becomes a sword. There is an episode where Jake forgets who he is. There is an episode where the camera follows a side character for the whole 11 minutes and Finn and Jake do not appear. The show is using its loose anthology structure to experiment with the kind of story it can tell. Some of these experiments are weirder than others. Some are dazzlingly successful. Some, if you are honest with yourself, are confused. But the cumulative effect is of a show that is no longer interested in being just one thing. It is interested in seeing how many things it can be. The cosmic side of the show, in season 6, gets very, very strange. There is a storyline about an enchanted weapon, the grass sword, that has its own consciousness and wants things from Finn. There is a return to Prismo and the time room, and a long meditation on the nature of fate and identity. There is an episode in which Finn meets a being from outside the universe entirely. The show is sketching out a cosmology that has no clear ceiling. The kingdoms of Ooh, you start to understand, are inside a larger reality that includes the multiverse, the time room, the cosmic prison from the season opener, the nightosphere where Marceline's father reigns, the strange dream space where the cosmic owl operates, and various stranger places beyond. The audience is not asked to memorize all of this. It is just shown more and more of it. The implication is that, no matter how much we have seen, there is more we have not. There is also, in this season, a kind of structural questioning that the show begins to pose to itself. The episode called The Comet, which serves as the season's finale, takes Finn to a confrontation with a cosmic being, who offers him a choice that is essentially a choice about what kind of person he wants to be. The Lich, who has been the show's biggest villain since season 2, reappears. But he reappears transformed, in a way the audience does not at first understand. Finn is asked, in this finale, to consider whether he wants to leave Ooh entirely and become something other than what he is. He says no. He chooses to stay. The choice is not framed as triumphant. It is framed as the choice you make when you have looked at the alternative and decided that you would rather be a small, mortal, growing up person than a cosmic entity. The show, having spent 6 seasons opening up its universe to be enormous, ends the season by having its main character decide to remain inside it as a finite being. The other major arc of season 6, and the one I want to spend some time with, is the way the show begins to address the question of who Princess Bubblegum is. Up to this point, Princess Bubblegum has been a slightly distant figure. She runs the Candy Kingdom. She does science. She is competent and a little bit cold. She is portrayed, in the early seasons, as Finn's crush, and then later, as Finn gradually outgrows that crush, as a complicated authority figure. In season 6, the show begins to ask harder questions about her. There is a stretch of episodes where she is overthrown in the Candy Kingdom and has to live as a regular citizen, and the experience changes the way she sees her own rule. There is an episode where she has to confront the moral cost of some of the decisions she has made as ruler. There is, throughout the season, a slow and careful recentering of her as a major character, whose interior life is more complicated than the show had previously let on. By the end of season 6, Princess Bubblegum is no longer a supporting character. She is one of the main 4 or 5 emotional axes of the show. Marceline in season 6 is mostly setting up what is going to happen in season 7. She is in fewer episodes, but the episodes she is in are pointed. She is sorting through her own past. She is starting to think about what she wants the next stage of her long life to look like. The show is not yet doing the full stakes miniseries, but it is, in season 6, planting the seeds. By the time you reach the end of season 6, you can feel that the show is preparing to spend a long time inside Marceline's head. It does immediately afterwards, in season 7. Season 6 is also the season in which the visual style of the show begins, very subtly, to shift. The colors become slightly more saturated in certain episodes and slightly more washed out in others, depending on the tone. The backgrounds become a little more detailed. The animation, while still done in the same general style, takes more chances. There are episodes that are essentially extended visual experiments, where the show plays with how it draws itself. The character designs are stable, but the world around the characters is being rendered more carefully. This is the kind of polish that comes from a long-running show whose crew has had time to get good at the thing they are doing. The crew, by season 6, knew this world intimately. You can feel it. What ties season 6 together, ultimately, is a kind of philosophical mood. The show, having spent 5 seasons building a coherent reality, spends season 6 taking it apart and asking what is underneath it. Episodes about identity, about the nature of memory, about the question of whether anything matters in a universe this large, about what it means to be a finite person in a world that includes the time room, all of these begin to accumulate. The show does not give you final answers. It just keeps asking. The cumulative effect, by the end of season 6, is that you, as a viewer, are no longer watching the same show you started watching. You are watching a show that has, very quietly, become interested in metaphysics. And it has done it without ever stopping being a comedy, without ever stopping being warm, without ever stopping being a place where a yellow stretchy dog can spend an episode trying to figure out how to make a really good sandwich. If season 5 was the season where Adventure Time committed to being a serial show with depth, season 6 is the season where it became, for lack of a better word, a literary show. It started to use its episodes the way a writer uses chapters. It started to assume that the audience would carry the meaning of one episode into the next one. It started to play long, complicated games with theme and motif. The fact that it could do all of this while remaining, on the surface, a children's cartoon, was a kind of magic trick that the show has never received quite enough credit for. The end of season 6 is the moment when, looking back, you can see the show is preparing for the long final act of its life. The next phase of Adventure Time is going to be defined by the miniseries, the 8-episode stories that take a single thread and pull it all the way through. The first of those miniseries, the one that arrives at the start of season 7, is one of the best things the show ever made. It is called Stakes. Stakes is a miniseries about Marceline. That is the simplest way to describe it. It is 8 episodes, broadcast as essentially a small movie that takes Marceline, finds her at a point in her life where she wants something different from what she has been, and follows her through a story that is, at its heart, about what you do when you no longer want to be what you have been for a long time. Marceline, in Stakes, decides she does not want to be a vampire anymore. She asks Princess Bubblegum to cure her. The cure works. She becomes mortal. But the magic that took the vampirism out of her did not destroy it. It released it in the form of 5 other beings, the ancient vampires whose souls she had absorbed in order to become the vampire queen. Stakes is the story of Marceline, mortal and aging, going to hunt down those vampires and reabsorb them, because the alternative is letting them loose in the world to do harm. That is the plot. The plot is, as usual for Adventure Time, the smallest thing the miniseries is about. Stakes is really about the fact that Marceline has been a 1,000-year-old vampire for so long that she does not remember what it is like to be anything else. She has trauma, she has friends, she has memories that go back to the Mushroom War. She has carried herself through centuries of grief and loneliness. The miniseries asks what it means for her to want, finally, to step out of the role she has been in. It asks what kind of person she would be if she could let go of being a vampire. And eventually, it asks what she would lose if she did. Stakes is, episode for episode, some of the most beautiful work Adventure Time ever does. There is an episode set during the Mushroom War in which we see, again, the young Marceline and the young Simon, this time in a context that gives us more of their story than we have ever seen before. There is an episode set in a quiet desert where Marceline confronts one of the ancient vampires and learns something about her own history. There is an episode where Marceline, in the middle of all of this, has a small reflective moment with Princess Bubblegum that, again, says nothing directly but says everything by what it does not say. The miniseries is, in the end, about the unresolvability of trauma. Marceline cannot, ultimately, get rid of being a vampire. She has been one for too long. It is part of her. By the end of Stakes, she has accepted that she is what she is, that she is going to have to live with what she has done and what has been done to her, and that the only way forward is forward. The ending of Stakes is not triumphant in a simple way. It is quietly hopeful. It is the kind of hope that comes after you have stopped pretending. Stakes also does the longer work of giving Princess Bubblegum and Marceline real screen time together. They are in the same place for most of the miniseries. They argue, they support each other, they look at each other. The show, in Stakes, is being unmistakably honest about what their relationship is, without ever quite saying it. Anyone watching this miniseries who is paying attention will understand, by the end of it, what these two characters are to each other. The show is no longer pretending that the audience cannot see what is in front of them. It is just choosing, for now, not to underline it. The underlining is going to come later, in the finale, and in Distant Lands. For now, in Season 7, the show is content to let the relationship breathe. Outside of Stakes, the rest of Season 7 moves with a particular kind of confidence. The show, after spending 8 episodes on Marceline's story, then spends the rest of the season returning to the questions it has been gathering for years. There are episodes that begin to set up the next major arc, which is going to involve the question of where Finn comes from. There are episodes that begin to develop minor characters who will become important in Season 8. There are episodes that, frankly, do not seem to have any purpose other than to spend time inside the world. The show, by Season 7, has earned the right to have these episodes. The audience has signed up for the long form. The audience does not need every episode to advance the plot. The audience is happy to just be in OO for a while. This is, I think, one of the more underrated qualities of late period Adventure Time. The show, having built such a rich world, was generous enough to spend significant time just living in it. There are entire episodes in Season 7 that are essentially hangouts. 2 characters in a kitchen, 4 characters at a campfire, a side character we have not seen for 2 seasons, coming back briefly to say a small important thing and then leaving again. These episodes do not have the visceral impact of Stakes, but they are part of what makes the show feel real. They are the equivalent, in a long novel, of the chapters where nothing very dramatic happens but the characters get to be themselves for a while. They are the connective tissue. Without them, the show would feel like a series of climaxes. With them, the show feels like a place you can come back to. Season 7 also begins to address, structurally, the question of Finn's mother. The Islands miniseries, which is the second major miniseries the show ever produces, and which is sometimes counted as part of Season 8 depending on how you count, is a story of Finn discovering where his people came from. He has spent his entire life believing himself to be the last human in OO. Island shows him, over the course of 8 episodes, that this is not true. There is, in fact, a whole hidden community of humans living on a chain of islands far from the world he has known, kept secret from him by both the geography of the world and a very deliberate choice made by people who used to love him. What Islands does, in a quiet and devastating way, is reframe everything you have ever thought about Finn's loneliness. Finn has been, for the entire show, the only human on screen, apart from a few brief glimpses in flashback. The show has used this fact emotionally for years. Finn's specialness, Finn's isolation, Finn's strangeness in his own world are all built on top of this. Islands takes the foundation and shows you what is underneath. It introduces Finn's mother, a woman named Minerva, who is not dead. She is, in fact, a kind of artificial consciousness running an entire island colony of humans who left Finn behind in Oo so that he could grow up free in a way she could not give him. The reunion between Finn and Minerva is one of the most carefully written things the show ever does. It is not a triumphant reunion. It is not a tragic reunion. It is the kind of reunion that happens when two people who love each other have to admit very honestly that they cannot stay together and that the choices that led them to be separated were the right choices at the time and are still the right choices now. Islands also does the work of explaining, finally, in concrete terms, what happened to Finn's father. We had met Martin in season 6. We had seen how badly the meeting went. Islands fills in the rest. We learned that Martin was, in a different way, also broken by the world. We learned that he ended up where he ended up because of choices that he made in moments of fear. The miniseries does not redeem Martin. It does not excuse him. It just gives him a story. By the end of Island, you understand that Finn is the son of two people, both of whom were trying in their own broken way to do something good, and both of whom failed Finn in different ways. The conclusion is not satisfying in a simple sense. It is, however, true. The show, by this point, has earned the right to give you difficult truth in place of an easy ending. The other thing Islands does, structurally, is solidify the miniseries as a format the show is going to lean on for the rest of its run. After Stakes, after Islands, the show has proven that it can sustain an 8-episode story without losing momentum. It can take a single character or a single question and follow it all the way through. This is a major shift in what the show is allowed to be. From here on, the major emotional arcs of Adventure Time are going to be delivered in miniseries form. The remaining standalone episodes are still important, but they are now serving the miniseries instead of the other way around. Season 8 is where this becomes most visible. The third miniseries, Elements, is, depending on how you feel about it, either the strangest thing Adventure Time ever did or the boldest. Elements is the story of what happens when the 4 elemental princesses of Oo each take over a part of the world and turn it into their own pure expression of their element. Fire takes over the south. Ice takes over the north. Slime takes over part of the center. Candy turns the Candy Kingdom into a kind of saccharine prison, where all of the candy people have been transformed into mindless, happy, sugar-coated versions of themselves, who do not remember who they used to be. The transformation is largely the work of a corrupted version of Princess Bubblegum, which is to say, Princess Bubblegum's own ideals taken to their most extreme conclusion. Elements is, in this sense, a critique of Princess Bubblegum's entire approach to ruling. It shows you what happens when a leader who wants to keep her people safe and happy actually has the power to do so, completely. The result is a horror. The candy people are content. They are also no longer themselves. Elements is divided. Some viewers find it the most visually inventive of all the miniseries, full of striking imagery and big emotional set pieces. Some viewers find it harder to get into because of how surreal and abstract it is. I think both reactions are honest. Elements is more abstract than Stakes or Islands. It is less interested in a single character's interior life and more interested in a kind of philosophical thought experiment played out across a world. Whether you respond to it depends in part on what you wanted from the show by then. If you wanted more close character work, Elements can feel like a detour. If you wanted the show to keep pushing what it could be visually and structurally, Elements is one of its boldest moves. What Elements does very effectively is set up the closing arc of the show. The story leaves the world of Oo damaged. The characters are slightly different at the end of the miniseries than they were at the start, The leadership of the Candy Kingdom is rethought. The relationships between major characters are subtly recalibrated. The show has, by the end of Elements, deliberately put itself into a state where it is ready to end. The pieces are arranged so that when the final arc comes, it will be able to draw on everything that has happened across all of the seasons before it. Season 8 is also when, in the background of all of this, you start to see the show say goodbye to certain things. There are episodes in Season 8 that feel, on a second viewing, like farewell episodes for individual characters or for individual ideas. A minor character whose arc started in Season 3 gets a quiet conclusion. A running visual gag from Season 1 gets one final outing. A relationship that has been simmering for years gets a small, late note. The show is not announcing these as farewells, it is just slipping them in. The cumulative effect, by the time you reach the end of Season 8, is of a show that is gently tidying up the room before its guests arrive for the last scene. The structure of Adventure Time's run, by the way, is messy enough that the season numbering becomes confusing in this part of the show. Different sources count Elements and Islands and the bonus episodes that came after them in different ways. The wiki and the network have not always been consistent. What is clear is that around this point in the show's life, the season number stops mattering as much as the position of an episode within the larger arc. The miniseries are the structural backbone of the late show. The seasons are, in a sense, just the containers that the miniseries happen to be packaged inside. If you watch the show with this in mind, you can almost see the arcs underneath the season numbers, and you can see how carefully each miniseries was placed. The other thing I want to say about Season 8, before we move on, is that this is the season where the cast starts to sound their age. In a good way. Jeremy Shada, who voices Finn, started voicing him as a child. By Season 8, he has been voicing the character for years, and his voice has matured along with the character. Finn, who started the show as a small boy, is by this point a teenager, and Jeremy Shada is by this point a teenager too. The voice is the same voice, but the timbre has changed, and the change matches the change in the character. This is one of those quietly remarkable things about long-running animated shows that have the same cast throughout. The performers age, the characters age. The two changes meet in the middle, and the resulting performance is something neither animation nor live action can quite produce on its own. You can hear the same thing in John DiMaggio's Jake. Jake, by Season 8, has been through a lot. He is, in the universe of the show, an old dog, and DiMaggio's performance, while still recognizably Jake, has grown into something a little more tired, a little more reflective. You can hear it in Olivia Olsen's Marceline. You can hear it in Tom Kenny's Ice King, whose voice work, across the years, becomes one of the great underappreciated performances in any animated show. The whole cast, by Season 8, has lived inside these characters for almost a decade. The characters are no longer roles. They are people the actors know. By the end of Season 8, the show has set the stage. Everything is in position. The final season is going to be one long goodbye, broken into the smaller pieces the show has always been built out of, and culminating in an extended finale that will, in retrospect, be remembered as one of the best endings any animated show has ever had. The final stretch of Adventure Time is, on paper, complicated. The show ran for 10 seasons by the most common count. The last 2 of those seasons contain some of the most beloved and most heartbreaking work in the entire series. The exact boundary between Season 9 and Season 10 is, as we mentioned, fuzzy depending on how you count, especially around the bonus episodes that follow Elements. But what is clear is that the last 20 or so episodes of the show, taken together, do the work of closing the entire story. They do not rush, they do not panic, they do not feel like the show is running out of time. They feel like the show, having earned the right to its ending, is going to take exactly as long as it needs to walk you to the door. There are a few small miniseries inside this last stretch that I want to highlight. There's a story about Marceline and her father, in which she finally confronts the long, complicated relationship she has had with him. There is a small arc that follows Princess Bubblegum back into the early days of her own existence, exploring how she came to be and how she became what she is. There is a story about Lemongrab, of all characters, who turns out to have one of the most quietly tragic arcs of any side character in the show. There is a story about Susan Strong, a long-running side character whose own connection to the human history of the world finally gets unpacked. Each of these arcs is the kind of thing that an earlier season of the show could not have done because the audience would not have cared enough yet. By the end, the audience cares deeply about every one of these characters, and the show is taking the time to honor that care. The bonus episodes that lead up to the finale are also where the show finally allows itself to be honest about Princess Bubblegum and Marceline. There is, in the lead up to the finale, an episode in which Marceline is in the Candy Kingdom, and she and Princess Bubblegum have an honest conversation. The conversation is not framed as a romantic confession. It is framed as the conversation that two people who used to be close and who hurt each other and who have spent years apart finally have. They sit on the steps of the kingdom and they talk about what happened. The show, having spent 8 seasons being careful about what it could and could not say about these two, is, by this point, ready to say it. The relationship is unmistakable. The audience, which has been carrying it as a quiet possibility since season 3, gets to see it land. And then comes Come Along With Me. Come Along With Me is the title of the 4-part finale of Adventure Time, which originally aired as a continuous block in September of 2018. It is the largest single piece of storytelling the show ever produced. It is approximately 44 minutes long, depending on how you watch it, and it pulls together threads from every season of the show. It is, more or less, what the show has been building toward since season 4. Although the show could not have told you that at the time, and the people making it might not have known exactly where they were going either. The destination, looking back, is one of the most coherent, satisfying, and earned endings in animation. The finale is structured around 2 things. The first is a war. A faction led by Gumbald, an old enemy of Princess Bubblegum, is preparing to attack the Candy Kingdom. Gumbald is, as the show eventually reveals, an old creation of Princess Bubblegum's, someone she made and then lost, and the conflict between the two of them has roots that go back to the earliest days of her rule. The war is essentially a confrontation between 2 versions of Princess Bubblegum's past, and the show uses the war as a way to interrogate everything we have been taught to believe about her over the seasons. The second thing is the Lich, who returns, transformed as a kind of cosmic threat that exists in a layer of reality just beneath the world. The Lich, by this point, has been a recurring villain since season 2. The finale gives him his final form, which is something more abstract and more fundamental than the creature in the amber. He is presented in the end not as a monster but as an entropy. He is the thing that wants the universe to be empty. The Lich, as Adventure Time defines him in the end, is the impulse toward nothingness. The way the finale defeats him is not by punching him hard enough. It is by, essentially, refusing to let go of being alive. It is also, very specifically, by remembering, by holding on to who one used to be, by refusing to forget. And the character who does the work of remembering in the final confrontation is the one who has been at the center of the show's interest in memory and lost the entire time. It is Simon Petrikov. It is the Ice King. It is the man who, in I Remember You, could not remember, finally remembering. There is a long dream sequence in Come Along With Me, in which all of the characters dream their way through their fears and their hopes simultaneously. The sequence is one of the most ambitious things the show ever did. It is rendered in a different visual style than the rest of the show, with a heavier line and a more painterly palette. It moves through dream logic. It uses musical motifs from across the entire run of the show. It is, in a way, the show condensing itself into a single sequence and showing you what it has been about all along. The dream is not, in the end, about any individual character. It is about a kind of communal imagining, about a future for the world. The future the dream shows you is one of the most quietly hopeful things in any ending I have ever seen. It is not a perfect future. It is a future that includes loss and change and time passing. It is also a future that includes love and friendship, and the continuation of the world after the people we love are gone. In the middle of all of this, the finale gives us 2 specific scenes I want to spend some time with. The first is the moment where Princess Bubblegum and Marceline finally, in the most direct way the show has ever allowed itself, are honest about what they are to each other. They are not in a romantic setting. They are in the middle of a battle. They have a brief moment together, and the show shows you, without ambiguity, that they love each other. The moment is brief. It is not the focus of the episode. It is one note in a much larger composition. But the note is sounded clearly, and once it is sounded, you cannot unhear it. The thing that the show has been implying since season 3 is, in the finale, finally said. The audience, having waited years for it, gets to see it. There are people for whom that single moment, in the context of the show, is the most important thing the show ever did. They have a point. It is the moment when, decades into a tradition of children's animation that had been very careful about what it would and would not show, a major character relationship was allowed to be exactly what it had been all along. The second scene I want to spend time with is the one in which Simon Petrikov, having had his memories restored to him in a way that we should not spoil for anyone who has not seen it, looks at the world he is back in and tries to figure out what to do next. Simon, by the time the finale ends, is a man who has lived 1,000 years of madness and is now sane again. He is older than everyone he knows. He has done things he does not remember. He has hurt people he does not remember hurting. He has loved people he is going to have to either find or grieve. The show, in the finale, does not try to give him an easy resolution. He is just there, standing in the world, with his memory restored, looking around. The show trusts you to know what that feels like. The show trusts you to feel it with him. The actual final scene of the show is not a scene of triumph or of mourning. It is a scene of two characters, sitting together, playing a song. The song is the closing theme of the entire show, called Come Along With Me, which is the title of the finale. The song is sung by two minor characters, Bimo and a small marshmallow figure, who are looking back on the events of the show from very far in the future. The implication is that what we have been watching is a story that has been told by someone, that the world of Ooh has continued long after the characters we know are gone, and that the story has been preserved in song. The choice to end the show this way is one of the most beautiful structural decisions in modern animation. It steps the camera back. It places the entire show inside a larger narrative. It tells you, very gently, that even though our heroes' stories have ended, the world they lived in is still there, in a kind of folklore future, where the things they did are remembered as legend. The song itself is, in the show's tradition, simple. It is a small lullaby. The lyrics are about how the singer will be there for the listener, no matter what happens, no matter how many years pass, no matter how strange the world gets. The song was written, like a lot of the show's most important songs, with the kind of care that makes it feel both very specific and very universal. It is the kind of song that, once you have heard it, never quite leaves you. The show, having been a comedy in season 1, and a tragedy in season 4, and a philosophical experiment in season 6, ends in season 10 as a lullaby. It is the right ending. It is the ending the show was always going to have, even if nobody at the start could have known it. When the credits rolled on Come Along With Me in 2018, there was a moment of stillness in the audience that you do not often get. People did not know what to do. The show had ended. It had been almost a decade. Children who had started watching it in elementary school were now in college. Adults who had started watching it as a curious oddity were now part of a fandom that had grown into a culture. The show had grown up alongside its audience. The show had also, in a sense, raised some of its audience. And now it was over. The world was different. The land of Ooh had survived. The characters had survived mostly. The audience, walking away from the finale, was the one that had been most changed. Except, of course, that the show was not really over. A couple of years after the finale, Cartoon Network and the show's creative team announced that Adventure Time was going to continue, in a new form, on the streaming service that would eventually become Max. The new form was a set of feature-length specials, set after the events of the finale, called Distant Lands. There would be 4 of them, each focused on different characters and different parts of the world. The first was called Bimo, the second was called Obsidian, the third was called Together Again, the fourth was called Wizard City. Each one was about 45 minutes long. Each one was made by many of the people who had made the original show. Adam Muto was back, the voice cast was back, the musical sensibility was back. Distant Lands was not a reboot, it was a continuation. And in a way that nobody really expected, it turned out to be some of the most mature, most emotionally adventurous work the show ever did. The first special, BMO, is the lightest of the four. It is a science fiction adventure in which BMO, the small console robot, leaves Ooo and ends up in a kind of asteroid station full of strange aliens and complicated political problems. BMO is given the chance, finally, to be the protagonist of a story instead of a sidekick. And the special leans into that. It is funny, it is whimsical, it feels, at moments, almost like a return to the earliest mode of the show, where the joy of the world was in its weirdness. But it is also, underneath the surface, the show telling you that the world outside Ooo is full of more world. The implication is that the universe is larger than the audience has imagined, and that the post-finale world is going to use the room it has to explore. The second special, Obsidian, is, for many fans, the centerpiece of Distant Lands. It is the special about Princess Bubblegum and Marceline. It picks up some indeterminate time after the events of the finale and shows them together in a relationship that the original show had built toward and that the finale had finally let land. They are partners in the most direct sense the franchise has ever shown. They live together. They are figuring out how to make a relationship work between two people who have 1,000 years of history and an unequal amount of investment in growing up. Marceline, who has never had a long-term partner in her life, is afraid of doing the wrong thing. Princess Bubblegum, who has spent centuries being responsible for things, is afraid of being too controlling. The special uses an external plot set in a kingdom called Obsidian, where one of Marceline's old friends is now queen, to give the two of them the room to have the conversation they have been failing to have. Obsidian is, structurally, a musical. It contains some of the most beautiful songs in the history of the franchise, written and performed by Olivia Olson, who voices Marceline, with collaborations from various longtime contributors to the show. The songs are not in the way the old Adventure Time songs sometimes were, jokes with a little emotional weight underneath. The songs in Obsidian are full songs, with verses and bridges that are about specific things in specific relationships that are sung by Marceline as part of her own emotional development. There is a song toward the end of Obsidian, sung by Marceline to Princess Bubblegum, that is essentially an apology for being afraid. And the song is one of the most quietly devastating pieces of music in any animated property I can think of. It is the kind of song you put on by accident and then have to stop and breathe for a minute. What Obsidian does structurally is treat its central relationship as a real adult relationship. Marceline and Princess Bubblegum in this special are not idealized. They argue, they miscommunicate, they have different theories of what a relationship is for, they have to do the slow work of figuring out how to live with another person. The special is honest about how hard this is, and it is honest about how worth it the work can be. It is, in retrospect, one of the rare pieces of mainstream animation that takes seriously the idea that two people who love each other still have to work very hard to actually be together, and that the working is itself the love. Obsidian is, in a way, the special that Adventure Time was always going to make eventually. The special the finale only had room to gesture at. The special that the original 11-minute structure of the show could not have supported. The streaming service format, with its longer running times and its more permissive content guidelines, gave the show the room to finally let this story breathe. The third special, Together Again, is the heaviest of the four. It is about Finn and Jake. The premise, which we should approach carefully because it is the kind of premise that can spoil the experience of watching the special for the first time, is that Finn, by the time of Distant Lands, has aged. He is older. He is not the boy he was, and he has lost his brother. Jake, who was always older than Finn, even when they were children, has, by most accounts, passed on. Together Again is the story of Finn going to find Jake again, in a kind of afterlife, in a city built out of the dreams and the memories of people who have crossed over. This is, on paper, an enormous emotional commitment. Adventure Time was always a show that took seriously the idea that things end. It was always a show that thought about loss. But it had never, until Together Again, asked the audience to sit with the actual death of one of its two central characters. The special is, as a result, one of the most grief-soaked things any animated franchise has produced. It is not, however, only sad. It is also, in a way that earns the title of the special, hopeful. The afterlife in Together Again is not a punishment. It is not even a reward. It is a kind of continuation. The people in it are still themselves. They still want things. They still love. They still struggle. The afterlife is, in the show's vision, a kind of strange neighborhood that exists slightly outside of time, where the people we have lost are still doing their best to be themselves. The reunion between Finn and Jake, when it finally happens in the special, is not played as a triumph. It is played as the kind of reunion that happens between an older brother and a younger brother who have not seen each other in many years, who have both grown up in different ways, who have both carried each other in their memory for the entire time they have been apart. They do not fall into each other's arms. They look at each other carefully. They sit down. They start to talk. The special, having done the work of getting them into the same room, is patient enough to let them just be together. The whole thing is, in a way, an extended exercise in showing the audience that the people we have lost are not gone in some absolute sense, that the relationships we had with them are still part of who we are, and that there is a kind of permanence in the way we carry them. Together Again, by the end, has put Finn back in the world. He is older, he is still alive, he is going to keep living without his brother. He has, however, had the chance to see Jake again, and the special trusts the audience to understand what that does for a person. The special is one of the most carefully made pieces of grief writing in any animated franchise. It is not afraid of the size of the question it is asking. It is not afraid of being slow. It is not afraid of letting a scene just sit there while a character processes what is happening to him. It is, in a way that the original show was preparing for the whole time. The show finally doing the work of saying goodbye to its main characters, properly, on its own terms. The fourth special, Wizard City, returns the franchise to a lighter register after the heaviness of Obsidian and Together Again. It is the story of Peppermint Butler, who has been a side character since the early seasons, finally getting an arc of his own. The special sends him to a wizard school, and the story is a kind of slow comedy of identity, in which Peppermint Butler has to reckon with who he is, who he was, and what he wants to become. It is shorter on the gut punch emotion of the previous two specials, but it is the one that does the work of returning the franchise to its more playful mode. It is also, in a quiet way, the special that establishes that the post-finale world is going to be hospitable to the kind of weird, character-driven side stories that the original show specialized in. Wizard City is a promise. It says, even after the main characters have ended their arcs, there are more stories to tell, and the franchise is going to keep telling them. Distant Lands, taken as a unit, is what you get when a creative team is allowed to come back to a show they love and make exactly the kind of thing they always wanted to make but were not allowed to. The specials are more mature than the original show. They use more adult language. They engage with sexuality in a way the original show could not. They have, in places, more graphic imagery than the original show would have permitted. They are still, however, the same show. The tone is the same. The warmth is the same. The interest in small characters and small moments is the same. Distant Lands does not betray the original show. It expands it. It shows you what the original show always was at its core, freed from some of the constraints of network children's television. It is one of the best examples I can think of in any medium of a franchise continuation that adds rather than subtracts. After Distant Lands, the franchise did something even bolder. It made a show out of one of its own jokes. Fionna and Cake is a streaming series that follows the gender swap versions of Finn and Jake, who had originally appeared in a single episode in season 3, then in a handful of later episodes as a kind of running gag. In the original show, the explanation for Fionna and Cake was that they were characters in a fan fiction the Ice King was writing, a fantasy he kept to himself in which everything was different, and everything was a little brighter and a little gentler. The conceit was a joke and a piece of character work, all at once. The Ice King, lonely and broken, wrote stories about a version of his life in which he was not lonely. It was deeply sad in a way the show did not always underline. and the episodes worked both as parodies of the main show and as small windows into who the Ice King really was. Years later, with Adventure Time officially over, the franchise made the choice to take this side joke and turn it into its own series. Fionna and Cake premiered on Max in 2023. It was not at all what most viewers expected. It was not, as some of the original audience feared, a glorified gender swap of the original show. It was, instead, a meditation on what it means to be an adult, on what it means to lose the wonder of childhood, on what it means to wake up one morning and find that the magical version of your life you used to imagine is now closed to you, and on what you do with that. Fionna and Cake are introduced in the new series as residents of a world that is not magical. It is essentially modern-day Earth. They have ordinary jobs. Fionna is a young woman in her late 20s, living in a small apartment, struggling to pay rent, working a job she does not love. Cake is her cat. Neither of them remembers, at the start of the show, that they were ever heroes. They have no recollection of the magical world the audience knows they came from. The premise of the show is that something in that magical world has reached into Fionna's reality and is trying to find her. The show, as it unfolds, is a quiet and at times very strange meditation on the line between the two worlds. The choice to set Fionna and Cake's adult lives in a non-magical world is one of the cleverest things the franchise ever did. Adventure Time all along had been a show that took the loss of an old world seriously. The Mushroom War in the original show was the way the world used to be. The audience watching the show was on the survivor's side, picking through the ruins. Fionna and Cake inverts that. It puts you in the world that was lost, the ordinary world, the world before the magic came. And then it asks what happens when the magic tries to come back. The result is a kind of double exposure, where the audience can see both the ordinary and the magical versions of reality at once. The original Ice King, now Simon Petrikov again, is a major character in Fionna and Cake. He is, more than any other character in the franchise, the show's center of gravity. By the time of Fionna and Cake, Simon is sane. He is no longer the Ice King. He has his memory back. He has his sense of who he is back. But what the show explores very carefully is that being sane after 1,000 years of madness is its own kind of catastrophe. Simon, in Fionna and Cake, is a man who has lost everyone he ever loved, who has done things he cannot undo, who has watched the world change and end and change again. He is older than anyone in the room. He is alone. And he is, as the show makes clear, deeply depressed. The portrayal of Simon Petrikov in Fionna and Cake is one of the most honest portrayals of adult depression I have ever seen in an animated property. The show does not romanticize it. It does not give him an easy way out. It shows him in the way you actually look when you are depressed. He moves through scenes without quite engaging with them. He gives himself reasons not to do things. He goes for long walks. He sits by himself. He gets in his own way. The show takes him seriously as a character who is in pain, and it takes seriously the work of getting him out of that pain. It does not offer him a magical cure. It does not pretend that the answer is just to cheer up. It puts him into a story with other people and lets him slowly, awkwardly, reluctantly start to engage with the world again. What Fionna and Cake is doing, when you step back and look at it as a whole, is what the original show always wanted to do, but could not always do directly. It is engaging with adult life. It is engaging with depression, with the loss of imagination, with the fear of being too old to start over, with the slow realization that the world is not the magical place you thought it was when you were younger, and with the strange consolation that even in the middle of that loss, there are still things worth doing and people worth being kind to. It is, in this sense, a continuation of Simon's arc that has been going since season 3. It is also, in a sense, a new beginning for the franchise as a whole. It is the franchise saying, even in the most ordinary version of reality, the warmth of these characters can carry a story. And underneath all of this, of course, Fionna and Cake is also a love letter to the audience that grew up with the original show. The people who watched Adventure Time as children are now, in 2023, in their 20s and 30s. They are doing what Fionna is doing. They are working jobs they did not pick. They are paying rent. They are wondering whether the version of themselves they used to imagine is still possible. The show is for them. it speaks to them directly. The franchise, which began as a children's cartoon, has grown up with the children who watched it, and is now making work for the adults those children have become. The fact that it has been able to do this without losing the warmth, the humor, or the strangeness of the original show is, frankly, one of the most remarkable things about the entire trajectory. It also means that the Adventure Time franchise, taken as a whole, is one of the most striking examples of a long-form story that has grown along with its audience. The early seasons are accessible to a very young viewer. The middle seasons begin to deal with material that requires a slightly older sensibility. The late seasons are about loss and identity. The finale is about endings and continuation. Distant Lands is about adult relationships, adult grief, and adult identity. Fionna and Cake is about adult depression and the search for meaning in a world that is not magical. If you watched the show at 6, you could understand the first seasons. If you came back to it at 12, you could understand the middle seasons. If you came back to it at 20, you could understand the late seasons and the post-finale work. The show has been, in this way, a kind of companion that ages along with its viewer. It is hard to think of many other long-running properties that have done this so consistently. The reason it works is that the people making the show were honest about the questions they were interested in, and they kept being interested in the questions that mattered to them as they aged. The show has grown up because the people making it have grown up. The audience has been allowed to grow up with both. I want to spend the next stretch of this video on the question of why this happened. Adventure Time, in retrospect, got better every season for a set of reasons that, taken individually, sound almost mundane, but taken together are unusual. We have been touching on these reasons all the way through, but I want to bring them out into the open and look at them one at a time, because I think understanding them is part of why the show is worth thinking about even years after it ended. The first reason, and probably the most important, is the way the show was structured around its storyboard artists. We mentioned this a few times already. Most American animated shows, especially network children's shows, are run on a script-first basis. A writer's room produces a finished script. The script is handed to a storyboard team whose job is essentially to translate the script into a sequence of drawings. The storyboard team is technical staff in this model. Their job is to follow the script. The script is the document of record. Adventure Time did not work this way. Adventure Time was, from very early on, a storyboard-driven show. The writer's room produced an outline. The outline went to 2 storyboard artists who were assigned to the episode together. The storyboard artists were responsible not just for the visuals, but for the dialogue, the pacing, the small character beats, the choice of what to linger on, the choice of what to skip. They were, in a meaningful sense, the writers of the episode they were boarding. They worked with the writer's room. They got notes, but the creative authority was distributed. The episodes were, episode by episode, made by different small teams of 2 or 3 people, each of whom had a different sensibility. This sounds like a recipe for chaos. In a less carefully managed show, it might have been. In Adventure Time, it was the opposite. It was the reason the show could be funny and sad and weird and warm all at once. Different episodes had different feelings because different people made them. And because the showrunners, both Pendleton Ward and later Adam Muto, trusted the storyboard artists to bring their own voices to the work, the show could include episodes that no single sensibility would have produced. The kid-friendly slapstick episodes were made by people who love slapstick. The quiet melancholy episodes were made by people who were drawn to melancholy. The strange psychedelic episodes were made by people who were interested in strange psychedelic things. They all shared the world. They all shared the characters. They all shared a commitment to the show, but they each brought something different. The result is a show that, episode by episode, has more textural variety than almost any other animated show I can think of. You can put 2 Adventure Time episodes side by side and feel like you are watching 2 different shows. They will share characters, they will share continuity, but the way they hold a camera, the way they let a beat play, the way they use silence will be different. This variety is, on a long time scale, what makes the show feel deeper than other shows. You are never watching a homogeneous product. You are watching the work of a small repertory of authors, each bringing their own concerns into the same world. over a long enough timeline, this gives the show a kind of accumulated weight, the same way a long-lived literary magazine gets a kind of accumulated weight from publishing many different authors over many years. The second reason the show gets better every season is the music. Adventure Time, from the start, had a relationship with music that was unusual for a children's network show. The original opening theme, sung in a small, reedy voice over a quick montage of images, set a tone that almost no other children's show had at the time. The theme was not anthemic. It was small. It was personal. It was, in its own way, a lullaby. The decision to open every episode of the show with a lullaby that introduced the world without explaining it was, in retrospect, a thesis statement about what the show was going to be. The music inside the episodes, similarly, was small. The show used the song format not for big production numbers but for character moments. A character would pick up a guitar. A character would hum to themselves while doing the dishes. A character would play a melody that turned out to be the same melody you had heard 6 episodes ago without realizing it. The show developed, over time, a library of recurring motifs that would be played quietly in the background of scenes the audience did not realize were going to be important. By the time the show ended, the soundtrack of Adventure Time was not really a soundtrack in the traditional sense. It was a kind of folk songbook, made up of dozens of small songs that the characters had written, sung, or hummed across the years, each of which carried the weight of the scene it was associated with. A lot of this work was done by people who were not primarily musicians. Rebecca Sugar, who came onto the show as a storyboard artist, contributed several of the songs that define the show's emotional landscape. She wrote songs like Remember You and a number of the songs that appear in the Marceline episodes of the later seasons. Olivia Olson, who voices Marceline, also wrote and performed many of Marceline's songs herself, and her songs became some of the most distinctive musical elements of the franchise. The musical voice of the show was, in this sense, like the visual voice of the show, distributed across many people, each of whom brought their own sensibility. The show's musical identity emerged out of the way these voices conversed. The third reason the show gets better every season is the cast, and the way the cast aged into the characters. We touched on this earlier. Jeremy Shada started voicing Finn when he was a child, and he voiced him through to adulthood. John DiMaggio, who had been a voice actor for years before Adventure Time, brought a kind of warmth and reliability to Jake that the character grew into. Hendon Walsh, as Princess Bubblegum, developed the character from a one-note ruler into a complicated, ambitious, sometimes ruthless figure over the course of nearly a decade of work. Tom Kenny, as the Ice King, did some of the most precise and most quietly heartbreaking voice work of his career, particularly in the late seasons and in Fionna and Cake, where his portrayal of Simon Petrikov takes everything he learned about the character across the entire run of the show and condenses it into a much smaller, much sadder performance. Olivia Olson, as Marceline, brought a kind of musical intelligence to the role that allowed Marceline to function both as a vocal performance and as a singer with her own voice and her own catalog of songs. The casting was, in a way, ahead of where the show ended up. The show in season 1 is not really a show that needs the cast it has. The kind of one-note jokes the early episodes are built around could have been delivered by less interesting actors. But because the show grew into something that required real performance, and the cast was already there, ready to grow with it, the show was able to take on more emotional weight without ever having to recast. The continuity of the voices is, I think, one of the things that gives Adventure Time its specific texture. You can hear the same actor say a line in season 1 and another line in season 8, and you can hear the years in between. Animation does not always let you hear that. Adventure Time made it part of the design. The fourth reason the show gets better every season is, frankly, the patience of its plotting. We have been touching on this throughout. The show was willing to wait. It was willing to plant a seed in season 2 and not pay it off until season 7. It was willing to imply something in a single shot and let the audience carry it for years before confirming it. It was willing, when it had a big idea, to take its time. This patience is rare on television. Most shows, when they have a big reveal, want to deliver it as quickly as possible. Partly out of fear that the audience will lose interest, partly out of a desire to keep the energy up, Adventure Time understood that some reveals only land if you have been quietly carrying them for a long time. The Ice King's identity, the history of the Mushroom War, the truth about Princess Bubblegum's past, the nature of the Lich, the full story of Finn's parents. All of these were paid off slowly, over multiple seasons, in ways that rewarded long-term attention. The show trusted that the audience would still be there when the payoff came, and the audience was. The fifth reason the show gets better every season is the way the show handled the question of who its main character was. In the early seasons, Finn was the unambiguous protagonist. The camera was usually on him. The plots were usually his plots. Everything moved through his perspective. As the show went on, this shifted. The show became increasingly comfortable with episodes in which Finn was a background figure or absent entirely. The world was wider than its hero. Marceline got more of her own episodes. Princess Bubblegum got more of her own episodes. Even minor characters like Lemongrab or Lumpy Space Princess or BMO got episodes that did not pretend to be about Finn at all. By the late seasons, the show was effectively an ensemble piece. By Distant Lands, the show was willing to make a whole feature-length special that did not include Finn or Jake at all. By Fionna and Cake, the show was willing to make a whole series in which Finn and Jake were almost peripheral to the main story. This is, again, unusual. Most long-running shows are reluctant to move away from their original lead. The lead is the audience surrogate. The lead is the brand. The lead is what people put on the t-shirts. Adventure Time, having built a large enough world, was willing to trust that the audience would follow the story wherever it went, even when the story was no longer primarily about the boy and the dog. The widening of the lens across the seasons is one of the most generous narrative choices in the show. It tells you that the world is bigger than any individual character, that everyone in it has their own story, and that the show is interested in those stories on their own terms. The sixth reason the show gets better every season is the way it handled queerness. We mentioned this in passing earlier. Princess Bubblegum and Marceline, as a romantic pairing, were on the show from very early on, in the form of small implications, small gestures, small choices in the way they looked at each other. The show in 2011 could not be explicit about this. The network, the syndication, the international markets, all of these placed constraints on what could be said. The show was, by all accounts, pushed up against those constraints from inside, with the storyboard artists and the writers and the showrunners all working to make the relationship as clear as they were allowed to make it. By the time of the finale, in 2018, the show could finally show the kiss. By the time of Obsidian, in 2020 or 2021, depending on when you mark the release, the show could center the relationship and write about it as a serious adult partnership. The trajectory of how the show was allowed to handle this across the years is in some ways a small history of what children's animation was allowed to do during this period. Adventure Time was one of the shows that helped move the needle. It did so quietly and slowly, by being patient and by trusting that the audience would notice. It is one of the things the show should be remembered for, not because it was the first show to do this kind of work, but because it did it well and because it did it in a way that respected the relationship as a relationship rather than as a representation milestone. The seventh reason the show gets better every season is the way it took the question of grief seriously. Adventure Time, all the way through, is about loss. It is about a world that has lost the version of itself that it used to be. It is about characters who have lost the people they used to be. It is about people who have lost loved ones, lost memories, lost hopes, lost time. The show, in the early seasons, gestures at this. In the middle seasons, it engages with it directly. In the late seasons, it takes it on as a central concern. In Distant Lands, particularly in Together Again, it does some of the most honest grief writing in any animated franchise. In Fionna and Cake, it lives inside the grief and asks what you do with the rest of your life once you have understood that loss is permanent. The willingness to take grief seriously is what separates Adventure Time from a lot of other children's shows, even good ones. Most children's shows, when they touch loss, touch it briefly. They do not stay with it. They do not let it shape the world. Adventure Time, especially in its later years, lets loss shape everything. The land of Ooh is what comes after a loss. The Ice King is what comes after a loss. Marceline is what comes after a loss. Finn, by the end of Together Again is what comes after a loss. The show is, in this sense, a long meditation on what life looks like when it is built on top of something that ended. And the meditation does not, in the end, conclude that life is empty. It concludes, gently, that life can be tender and meaningful and worth living, even in the shadow of what was lost. That is a hard conclusion to earn. The show earns it because it has been earning it the whole time. The 8th reason the show gets better every season is its willingness to be silly. This is the reason that is easiest to overlook, but it is the most important. Adventure Time is funny. It is funny in a way that, even in its saddest moments, never quite goes away. Jake has a joke in almost every episode. Finn has a kind of childlike enthusiasm that is in itself a joke. The world is full of jokes. In the design of the characters, in the names of the kingdoms, in the inventiveness of the magic. The show, for all of its emotional depth, never stops being a comedy. And the reason this matters is that the comedy is the thing that lets the tragedy in. If the show were only sad, the sadness would feel like work. Because the show is genuinely funny, the sadness comes as a surprise. And surprises land harder than expected things. The relationship between comedy and tragedy in Adventure Time is the relationship that the best of these shows always understand. The Simpsons, at its peak, understood this. BoJack Horseman understood it. Steven Universe, which is in some ways the spiritual successor to Adventure Time, made by people who worked on Adventure Time, understood it. The deeper the comedy, the deeper the tragedy can go. The more honest the joke, the more honest the heartbreak. Adventure Time is built on this principle from the first episode to the last. It is fundamentally a comic show that takes tragedy seriously. And it is the comedy that gives it permission to take the tragedy seriously. And it is the tragedy that gives the comedy weight. The two are not separable. The show that gets better every season is the show that is funnier every season and sadder every season in roughly equal measure, because the writers and the storyboard artists understood that the two depend on each other. The 9th reason the show gets better every season is the way the network gave it the room. Cartoon Network, in this period, was making a number of bets on creator-driven animation that were unusual for a children's network at the time. Adventure Time was the first of those bets to really break out. The success of Adventure Time was, in turn, what made the network willing to greenlight other creator-driven shows. Steven Universe came next. Regular Show came around the same time. The Amazing World of Gumball came in the same general window. There was a period in which the network was unusually open to the idea that the people making the shows should have a real authorial voice, and Adventure Time was both the proof of concept and the standard bearer for that approach. Without Adventure Time, the network might have stayed more cautious. Because Adventure Time existed and worked, the network was willing to let its shows take more chances. This is not a criticism of any individual at the network. It is a way of saying that the show came along at the right moment, and that the network was willing to let it become what it was. That kind of alignment is rare, and it is part of why the show was able to keep getting better. The 10th reason the show gets better every season, and this is the one I want to spend the most time on, is its relationship to the audience. Adventure Time, from very early on, treated its audience as collaborators. It put detail into the world. It buried jokes, it buried references, it buried sad moments. It buried entire conceptual structures behind small visual choices, and it trusted the audience to find them. The audience, in turn, did. The fan community around Adventure Time was, from the early years, one of the most active and observant fan communities in modern animation. People made theories, people drew maps of the world, people wrote essays about what the various background details meant. People reverse engineered the timeline of the Mushroom War from a handful of glimpses. The relationship between the show and the audience became, over time, a kind of conversation. The audience would notice something. The audience would discuss it. The show, sometimes, would respond by paying off the noticing in a later episode. This relationship is one of the most important things about Adventure Time and is the reason it gets better every season in a specific way. The show, having an attentive audience, could afford to put more in. The show, having put more in, attracted a more attentive audience. The cycle reinforced itself. By the late seasons, the show was able to do things that depended on the audience paying attention to small details across multiple years. and the audience was, indeed, paying attention. The audience caught the small references. The audience caught the small motifs. The audience caught the small visual repetitions. The show, having an audience that was paying that close attention, could write at a level of compression that most shows cannot afford. A single shot could carry an enormous amount of meaning because the audience had been trained to read single shots that way. A single line of dialogue could undo years of assumptions because the audience had been trained to listen at that level. This is, in a way, what the audience grew into. The show in season 1 is a show you can watch passively. The show in season 7, especially during the Stakes or Islands miniseries, is a show that rewards active engagement. The audience that started watching the show in season 1 and stayed through season 7 had been trained over the course of the show to be the kind of audience season 7 needed. The show did not just get better. The audience got better alongside it. This is the thing about long-running shows that no one tells you in advance. The audience is part of the work. The audience contributes to what the show can become. A show that runs for many years on the same network with the same general production team develops a kind of shared language with its viewers. The viewers learn how to watch the show learns how to write for the viewers it is trained. The two co-evolve. By the end of the run, the show is doing things that would have been incomprehensible if it had tried them in the first season. Not because the techniques are too sophisticated, but because the audience was not ready for them yet. The audience had to be brought along. The show, having brought the audience along, could attempt anything. I want to spend some time, before we get to the close, on a question that maybe sounds simple but is actually not. The question is, what was Adventure Time actually about? We have talked about its plot and its characters and its production. We have talked about its arcs and its endings. We have talked about its choices. But if you step back from all of that and ask what the show was about in a single sentence, the answer is not obvious. I think if I had to give one answer, I would say that Adventure Time is a show about what comes next. That sounds vague. Let me unpack it. The world of Adventure Time is, at every level, a world built on top of an ending. The Mushroom War destroyed the world that used to be. The land of Ooh is what came next. Marceline's life as a vampire is what came next after she lost everything she knew as a child. Simon's life as the Ice King is what came next after the crown took his identity. Princess Bubblegum's rule is what came next after she emerged from whatever process produced her in the first place. Finn's life with Jake is what came next after he was abandoned in the woods as a baby. The show, at every layer, is about characters who are living the next part of a story whose first part is broken. This is, in a way, what makes the show so consoling to watch. It is consoling in a way I have not always seen identified clearly. Many people who love Adventure Time describe it as a comforting show, and they often struggle to say exactly why it is comforting, especially given how much sadness it contains. I think the comfort comes from the fact that the show, every season, demonstrates that life continues after a loss, that a 1,000-year-old vampire can find new friends, that a man who has lost his mind can still write love songs to the person he used to know, that a kingdom can be ruled by someone who is making it up as she goes, that a boy who was abandoned by his parents can still grow up into a good person. The world has ended, and the world has continued, and the continuation includes new joys and new losses and new versions of the people we used to be. The show, by showing this over and over, makes the idea that life continues after a loss not just an idea, but a felt experience. This is also, I think, why the show gets better every season. Because the seasons themselves are doing the work of demonstrating over and over that the next thing is possible. Each season is itself a kind of what came next. Each season is the show, having ended the previous season, finding that there is still more to say. By the time you reach the end of the run, you have watched the show enact, structurally, the very thing it is about. The show is about continuation. The show, by continuing, is its own evidence for itself. I want to spend some time also on a particular detail that I think is one of the show's quiet masterpieces. The Mushroom War, as a piece of world building, is one of the most successful examples I can think of letting a backstory remain mostly unspoken. The show, across its whole run, gives you fragments, a road sign, a flashback, a line of dialogue, a glimpse of an old photograph, a song, a landscape that looks like a city that has been turned into grass. The show never sits you down and explains the Mushroom War in full. It never gives you a full historical document. It does not tell you, in the way many post-apocalyptic stories do, exactly what went wrong and why. It just lets you accumulate impressions. Over time, the impressions become a picture. The picture is not entirely coherent. There are pieces that do not fit together. There are details that contradict each other. But the overall mood, the overall sense of what happened, is unmistakable. There was a war. It used weapons that were terrible. It changed everything. The people who were alive then are mostly dead. The people who survived are not the people they used to be. The world is what is left. By refusing to fill in the entire history, the show makes the history feel real. Real history in the actual world is also incomplete. We do not know everything about anything in the past. We know fragments. We piece them together. We argue about the gaps. The Mushroom War in Adventure Time has the texture of real history because it is presented to us the way real history is presented to us, in pieces, with gaps. The show is not asking us to swallow a backstory. The show is asking us to do the slow, patient work of imagining a past out of the evidence that survives. This is, in a way, what watching the show is. It is a kind of archaeology. You are a viewer in the position of a person walking through ruins, pointing at things, asking what they used to be. The show, by structuring itself this way, makes the audience an active participant in the world. The audience is not just watching. The audience is also reconstructing, and the reconstruction itself becomes part of the experience of the show. People in the fandom developed elaborate theories about the Mushroom War, about who had bombed whom, about what the political situation was like before the bombs fell, about who Simon was and what he was studying. Most of these theories are not, strictly speaking, supported by the show. Some of them are contradicted by later episodes. But the activity of the theorizing is not wasted. It is the way the audience participates in the imagination of the world. And the show, knowing that the audience is doing this, leaves room. It does not fill in every detail. It lets the imagination of the audience be part of the texture of the world. That openness is one of the things that I think makes the world of Adventure Time feel bigger than the show. There is the show, and then there is the audience's imagination of the show. And the two together make a world that is larger than either. Most fictional worlds do not have this property. They are exactly as big as the work that contains them. Adventure Time, because of how the world was built and how the audience was invited to participate, has a larger world than the work itself. It is one of the reasons people keep coming back to it. There is always more to imagine. There are always more gaps to fill in. Another thing I want to address is the question of what Adventure Time was doing in terms of its visual style. The look of the show is unusual, and the look is part of the meaning. The character designs are simple. The line work is relatively thin and consistent. The characters tend toward primary colors and basic shapes. Finn is a small white triangle with a hat on top. Jake is a stretchy yellow rounded shape. The backgrounds, by contrast, are often more detailed and more painterly than the characters. There is often a tension, in any given frame, between the simplicity of the characters and the complexity of the world they are standing in. This tension is doing real work. The characters look like they could be from a simpler children's show. The world looks like it could be from a much more serious illustrated book. The visual contrast tells you, even before any plot has happened, that the characters are simple beings inside a complicated reality. They are not equipped to understand everything around them. They are doing their best. This is, again, one of the things the show was doing without telling you it was doing it. The visual design is the philosophy. The simple characters in the complicated world are the show's whole thesis about what it is to be a person. We are, all of us, simple beings inside a world that is older and stranger and more layered than we can comprehend. The way Finn moves through Ooh with his cheerful determination and his small list of basic priorities is in a way the same way you move through the world. You do not understand everything. You do not need to understand everything. You can still try to be good and try to help your friends and try to do the right thing, even when the world around you is older and stranger than you can quite see. The character designs also let the show do things that more realistic animation could not. A simple character can carry a tremendous amount of emotion because there is so little in the way. A change in the curve of an eye, A tilt of a head, a small adjustment to a smile. With characters this simple, these tiny changes read as enormous emotional shifts. The show, especially in its quieter moments, uses this constantly. There is a kind of stillness Adventure Time can achieve, where a character just stands and looks, that feels heavier than it has any right to be. That stillness is possible in part because the characters are designed for it. There is nothing else on the screen to distract you, just a simple face, a look, the world behind the face. I want to talk also about the role of side characters, because I think one of the things that gets better every season is how the show treats them. In season 1, the side characters are mostly jokes. Lumpy Space Princess is a joke about a princess being lumpy. Lemon Grab is a joke about a lemon being angry. The various candy people are jokes about candy people. The show, in its early seasons, uses these characters mostly as one-shot premises. By the late seasons, most of them have had real arcs. Lemon Grab, who is in season 1 a one-note loud character, becomes, by the late seasons, one of the saddest characters in the show, a person whose entire existence is defined by his having been created without the equipment to be in the world properly. Lumpy Space Princess, who is in season 1 a recurring source of comic relief, becomes a character with her own romantic life, her own ambitions, her own family relationships. Even minor candy people, the kind of background figures who exist mostly to be in crowd scenes, get small moments where the show treats them as full people. This treatment of side characters is one of the most generous things the show does. It is also one of the things that makes the world of Ooh feel real. In a world where every character is treated as a full person, the world itself starts to feel populated. The kingdoms are not just sets. They are full of people who have their own lives. The show, by paying attention to its side characters, gives the impression that there is, at all times, a vast amount of life happening around the edges of the main story. That impression is what makes Ooh feel like a place rather than a stage. The fact that Adventure Time was able to do all of this within the format of an 11-minute children's cartoon is, frankly, miraculous. Most children's cartoons, even good ones, do not develop their side characters this fully. Most do not give their main characters this much emotional room. Most do not write villains as tragedies. Most do not allow their lead character to age across the run of the show. Most do not let their lead character step back from the story to let other characters carry it. Most do not commit to a long-form arc that pays off years later. Most do not contain a song like Remember You. Most do not contain a special like Together Again. Most do not contain a series like Fionna and Cake. Adventure Time did all of this. It did all of this within a format that, when the show started, was not believed to be capable of any of it. The show changed what people thought a children's cartoon could be. It changed what executives thought a children's cartoon could be allowed to do. It changed what writers thought they could attempt. It is one of the reasons the landscape of animation in the 2020s looks the way it does. The shows that came after Adventure Time, the shows that took emotional risks, the shows that built complicated worlds, the shows that took their audiences seriously, all of them owe something to Adventure Time. The show, by getting better every season, made it possible for other shows to start at a higher level. The bar moved. The window opened. There is one more thing I want to talk about before we get to the close, and that is what the show says indirectly about time itself. The title of the show is Adventure Time. The title sounds, on its surface, like a child saying it is time for an adventure. It is a kind of cheerful declaration. But if you watch the show for long enough, the title takes on a different meaning. The show is about adventures, yes, but it is also about time. Time as a force. Time as a process. Time as a thing that wears people down. Time as a thing that gives people the chance to become someone new. Time as a thing that makes loss inevitable and continuation possible. The time room, where Prismo lives, is the show's literal metaphor for this. It is the place where time is, somehow, contained. It is a place outside of the ordinary flow. Visiting it is a kind of philosophical experience. You are reminded that the urgency of the moment inside the world you live in looks very different from outside. Marceline's centuries of life are another version of this. She has watched time pass on a scale that the other characters do not have access to. The mountains she walked past as a child are different mountains now. The friends she knew are dead. The world has been rebuilt twice. The show takes Marceline seriously as a person who knows things about time that the other characters cannot. She is, in this sense, the show's resident witness to deep time. The Ice King is the show's resident victim of deep time, the person who has lived too long and lost himself to the process. Simon, by the end, is the show's resident survivor of deep time, the person who has come out the other side of having lost himself and is now trying to figure out what to do with what remains. The show, by including all of these characters, lets you think about time at several different scales at once. Finn's scale, where a season is half his lifetime. Jake's scale, where a year is a long time. Princess Bubblegum's scale, where a decade is the distance between two political decisions. Marceline's scale, where a century is a chapter. Simon's scale, where a millennium is a story. The Lich's scale, where time is something to be ended. The Cosmic Owl scale, where time is a dream. The show, by inhabiting all of these at once, becomes a kind of meditation on time itself. You watch the show and you accumulate, over the seasons, a strange awareness of how time works for different beings. You begin to think about your own time differently. You begin to think about the people in your life and how long you have known them. You begin to think about what it would feel like to know someone for 1,000 years and then to lose them. You begin to think about what it would feel like to be lost yourself and then to come back. The show, in its quiet way, is doing serious philosophical work. It is not a philosophy textbook. It is a children's cartoon. But it has inside it the kind of slow, patient thinking about time that most philosophy aspires to. This is, in a way, what I mean when I say the show gets better every season. It is not just that the writing improves. It is not just that the animation grows. It is that the show, by continuing, accumulates a kind of philosophical weight that a single season could not contain. The seasons are the way the show thinks. The seasons, watched in order, are like the chapters of a long meditation. Each season takes the meditation a little further. By the end, you have thought, alongside the show, about more things than you would have thought a children's cartoon would let you think about. And the thinking has been gentle and warm and held inside a story that was also fun to watch. I want to spend the last stretch of this video on Finn himself, because Finn, in some ways, is the character the show changes the most around. He starts as a small boy, he ends as a grown man. The seasons of the show are also the seasons of his life. If you watch the show in order, you see him grow up, not in a cosmetic way, in the actual way. The arc of Finn, across the seasons, is one of the longest and most carefully drawn coming-of-age stories in animation, and it is the spine that the rest of the show is built on. In season 1, Finn is a small boy who wants to be a hero. His sense of what a hero is uncomplicated. A hero punches bad things. A hero saves princesses. A hero is brave. A hero is loud. Finn, in season 1, has no complications about any of this. He believes in the role. The role is in some ways the whole of his identity. When he is not being a hero, he barely knows who he is. The show, in season 1, mostly lets him have this. It is funny and charming to watch a boy who is so utterly committed to a model of heroism that the world does not really support. The show, gently, starts to undermine it. By season 3, Finn is starting to notice that the world is more complicated than his model of heroism can handle. There are situations where punching the bad thing is not the right move. There are situations where the bad thing is not even a bad thing. There are situations where Finn finds himself in the wrong, in ways he had not anticipated. The show, throughout season 3, gives him a series of small experiences in which his certainty is dented. He starts to ask questions. He starts to be confused. He starts to grow. By season 5, Finn is doing real interior work. He is dealing with the appearance of his father. He is dealing with the consequences of his own emotional decisions. He is starting to think about what he wants from his own life, separate from the script of heroism he had been following. The episodes that involve his father are some of the hardest episodes for Finn to be in. He has to confront the fact that the parent he had imagined for years is not the parent he actually has, and that the parent he actually has is the kind of person who would leave him. The show does not give Finn an easy time with any of this. Finn responds with confusion, with anger, with self-doubt. He makes bad decisions. He hurts people. He has to learn how to apologize. He has to learn how to forgive himself. By the late seasons, Finn is a different person. He is older. He is more careful. He is more tired. The certainty of season 1 has been replaced by a kind of cautious, hard-won wisdom. He still wants to do the right thing. He is no longer sure he knows what the right thing is. He is also no longer alone in figuring it out. The show, by the late seasons, has surrounded him with friends who can help him think. He has Jake. He has Princess Bubblegum, who has gone from being his crush to being his colleague and, in a way, his friend. He has Marceline, who has become a kind of older sister figure to him. He has the various people he has met across the seasons, all of whom have their own relationships to him. The lonely boy who wandered out of the woods in season 1 is, by the late seasons, embedded in a community. In the finale, Finn does something that I think is the perfect ending for his character. He does not save the world by punching it. He does not save the world by being a hero in the sense he had originally imagined. He saves the world, more or less, by being a person, by choosing, in the middle of a crisis, to be kind, by holding a hand, by telling someone the truth, by being present. The show, by having him save the world in this way, retroactively reframes what his entire arc has been about. He was not, it turns out, training to become a great warrior. He was training to become a great person. The two are not the same thing. The show takes pains in the finale to make sure you understand the difference. By Distant Lands, Finn has aged further. By Together Again, he is older still, old enough to have lost his brother. And he is, even then, still the same person he was at the beginning. In the deepest sense, he still cares. He still wants to do the right thing. He is still kind. The kindness was there from the start. The show, by following him across so many years, lets you watch how the kindness deepened into wisdom and how the wisdom let him survive the losses that growing up always brings. This is, in a way, the longest and most patient character arc in animation. There are very few animated characters who have been allowed to age across an entire show's run. There are even fewer who have aged in this way, where the aging is not just a matter of design but of interchange. Finn is one of them. The audience that has watched Finn from season 1 to Together Again has watched him grow into himself in a way that is, frankly, rare. We have seen him be wrong. We have seen him grow out of being wrong. We have seen him be hurt. We have seen him survive being hurt. We have seen him lose people. We have seen him keep going. And this is, I think, the deepest reason the show gets better every season. The deepest reason is Finn. The show is, ultimately, an experiment in showing what it looks like to grow up well. Finn, across the seasons, grows up. The world around him is the world he grows up in. The other characters are the people who help him grow up. The arcs of the seasons are the chapters of his growing up. The show, by being a coming-of-age story across an entire decade of weekly episodes, gets to do something almost no other property gets to do. It gets to show the slow shape of a life. The small choices that, over time, become a character. The mistakes that, over time, become wisdom. The friendships that, over time, become love. The losses that, over time, become memory. When I rewatch the show, this is what I think about. I think about Finn at the beginning, jumping into the cave with his sword raised, certain that he knows what to do. And I think about Finn at the end, sitting in a room with a person he loves, listening, not certain at all, but present. The distance between those two Finns is the distance the show travels. The seasons in between are the road. The show, by being long enough to contain that road, by being patient enough to walk down it slowly, by being honest enough to let it be hard sometimes, becomes the kind of show that can change the way you think about your own road. That is a thing very few children's shows manage to do. It is a thing very few shows of any kind manage to do. Adventure Time, by getting better every season, by trusting its audience and its characters and itself, became one of those very few. It is why people who watched it as children carry it into adulthood. It is why people who started watching it as adults stay with it. It is why the show, even years after its final special, is still being talked about, still being rewatched, still being shared with new viewers who have never seen it before. The show is a long, slow, generous companion. It is the kind of thing you can come back to. It is the kind of thing that every time you come back to it has a little more in it than you remembered. The show, in this sense, keeps getting better even after it is over. The seasons keep deepening in your memory of them the longer you live with them. So when people say that Adventure Time gets better every season, they are saying something specific. They are not saying that every season is more sophisticated than the last in some technical sense. They are saying that the show, by accumulating, becomes more itself. The seasons add up, the seasons inform each other. The seasons let you see things in the earlier seasons that you could not see at the time. The show is, in its later years, the kind of show that makes its earlier years better by giving you the context to understand what was happening underneath. A rewatcher of Adventure Time going back to season 1 with everything they know from season 10 sees a show that is much deeper than the one they remember. The show, in this sense, gets better every season in two directions. It gets better as it goes forward, and it gets better backwards as well, with each new piece reshaping the meaning of what came before. When I think about Adventure Time now, years after the original finale aired and several years after Distant Lands and after Fionna and Cake, what I think about is the strange thing the show pulled off. It took a children's network slot, 11 minutes at a time, and used it to tell a long, slow, generous story about loss and continuation and love and time. It did this without raising its voice. It did this without ever pretending to be more serious than it was. It did this while remaining all the way through a funny and warm and silly show. The fact that it could be funny and serious at the same time, in roughly equal measure, for almost a decade of weekly episodes plus several more years of post-finale work, is the kind of accomplishment that happens very rarely, and usually only when a particular group of people is given enough room to do their best work for long enough. The show is still finding new viewers now. Children who were not born when it premiered are growing into it. Adults who missed it the first time are discovering it through clips and through friends and through small recommendations. The world of Ooh is still a place people can go. The characters are still living in it, somewhere in our collective imagination. The songs are still being sung. The show, in this sense, has not really ended. It has just settled into the long, quiet life of a beloved thing, where it will be picked up by new viewers for many more years and shared with the people they love. If you are listening to this late at night with the lights low, I hope it gave you a little of what the show gives you. A little warmth, a little wonder, a little of the sense that the world is bigger and stranger and kinder than it sometimes looks. The show is, in its own quiet way, a kind of long lullaby. It sings you into the world. It reminds you, gently, that what comes next is possible, that losses can be carried, that kindness still matters, that growing up does not mean losing yourself. The seasons of Adventure Time, taken together, are the proof. They get better every year because the people making them kept caring, kept paying attention, kept trying to do the next thing well. That is, more or less, what a good life looks like, too. Thank you for spending this time with me here at Pine Hat. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.